Hello. We on? Yep. Thank you very much, Kaiko. Good morning. It's great to be here. First of all, let me start off with a bit of self-introduction. My name is Daniel. I've been in Japan since 2010, originally from Ireland. And I first came here, or I first started at Stripe in 2014 to start off our operations here, which means bringing Stripe's services to Japanese companies, and also means helping international companies who are on Stripe come to Japan. ちなみに日本語でも大丈夫ですけれども、後で質問があれば、ちょっと英語の発表ということで。So we've had plenty of traction in Japan. Here are some of the companies who are on Stripe. These are our Japanese users. You can see there's a nice mix of large traditional companies. We've got A&A and Kadokawa, these sort of larger older companies. And we also have a mix of smaller, exciting startups, sort of fast-moving. Innovative startups are also down here. So this is mainly what I'm working on every day. But today, to kick off the conference after our keynote, I'd like to talk to you a little bit about building for builders and how to make developers a priority for your business. I'll share with you some concrete tips on the lessons that we've learned while building Stripe's API. And hopefully this can apply to your business if you're building APIs or if your product has an API. And if not, I'm sure you're going to consume APIs, and you can sort of use this as a bit of reference for how to identify high-quality API products. So before we dive in, I'd like to take a moment to talk about the sort of API economy and the growing impact it's having on our society. Infrastructure might be underrated, but it's absolutely essential for economic growth. As an analogy, you can think about building web APIs, kind of like building a network of roads. And the parallel I want to make here is, by building a network of roads, you're not building a destination, but you're opening up a network of possibilities. You're enabling people to reach places they haven't sort of been able to get to before. So by opening up an API, you're sort of creating and expanding a network of opportunities. By creating roads, you're enabling an industry for example, car makers. But you also create an entire ecosystem of new opportunities for individuals and businesses alike. Think about how much of an asset a performing road network is in a modern economy. In fact, roads have been a key enabler of the second industrial revolution for more than a century, and we're seeing that APIs are sort of powering the next industrial revolution. APIs have a strong impact on innovation. These are some interesting stats from Atomico, based out of London. And in 15 years, the time to reach 100 million users has come down from 72 months to 25 months. And if you want to look at how fast people are going international, what used to take 41 months, more recently is down to 21 months on average. So, a lot of startups are going international in less than 2 years. APIs are fundamentally changing the way that we build software. And the emergence of strong players have helped entrepreneurs make better decisions, and you can get up and running in a matter of days in what used to be many months. As another example, here's some more interesting numbers. It's become relatively easier for software developers to start a company. If you want to look at between 2000 and 2015, when the study came out, there's a 3 order of magnitude drop in the cost of getting a business up and running. What used to cost $5 million to start a business, that's now around, well, it was $5,000 back in 2011, and it's surely even cheaper now. The emergence of open source has helped this. Cloud computing, AWS, GCP instances cost $10, $15 a month for a cheap instance. This has helped, but in the last 5 years, I really think that this shift has been because of a more specific cause, which is the API economy. Today, developer platforms, APIs have become ubiquitous, and we're really seeing the cost of starting a business to come down. So today, 2 developers in the garage have the same capabilities at their fingertips, that a decade ago only a very large corporation would have had access to. And the main asset for a startup is their ability to focus. Their ability to focus on what makes their product great, what really makes their product special. And that's exactly the thinking behind every API company, solving problems so that entrepreneurs can focus on what they do best. Right? So APIs are the fastest route to building great products. Using an API is obviously cost efficient. It's also a smart business decision in the long run because an API provider works on giving you the highest standard product in the industry and helps to future-proof your apps and services. So we think that APIs are the fastest route to building great products and the changing force of the economy. And still, there exists a huge range in quality between API providers. And as the API economy continues to mature, companies need to compete not just by simply having an API. I think a lot of companies are like, hey, we've just started an API, but it's about having a very high-quality API. So I'm going to share 8 concrete tips from what we've done at Stripe today to sort of get across how we see how we think about building high-quality APIs and developer experiences. So number 1, incentives. It's very important to align your business with your developers' needs. Specifically, a couple of questions you can think about. If developers start building on top of your API, and a lot of developers start building on top of your API, will that be good for your core business? We've seen some companies pull back their APIs. Twitter has done this before. Spotify and Netflix have had difficulties here as well. So you need to think about, will your API, and will the success of your business enable the success of the people who are consuming your API as well? And this alignment of incentives is very critical. To talk a little bit about Stripe and sort of how this applies to Stripe, if you think about payments, no one should have to think about all the complexities behind payments. Payments is terribly complex. And one thing to look at here, there's actually a deficiency in the internet infrastructure when it comes to payments. You've all heard of HTTP. Here's the 402 or 404 error. You've seen 404 error before. Coming down, 403 error. Everyone knows 403. 402 error. Who knows 402? Right. 402 is actually payment required. Unfortunately, reserved for future use is where this is. And that's kind of a pretty accurate description of the state of online payments. It's just been reserved for future use. It's been there as an idea, but it hasn't become a reality. So that's really what Stripe is trying to fix. And if you look at what the state of the whole thing was 10 years ago, it was really difficult to try and get online payments up and running. This is kind of what a merchant solutions website would look like. It looked like every one of these companies had only recently heard of the internet. If you would try and sign up, you would be a contact form to get in touch with their sales team. And another option would be to use PayPal, but the integration documents 10 years ago was a 466-page PDF file. And even when you've gotten through this and it's working, you still have to send people to PayPal. You couldn't build the experience that you really wanted to build. So this is even just for the most basic case of just selling a thing on the internet, which shouldn't be that hard. So that's why we created Stripe. So anyone can accept payments from anyone in the world in a matter of minutes. This is a sample of what the API looks like. We believe that payments is a problem that's rooted in code. That's not rooted in finance necessarily. And as we've grown, we've been working to sort of improve and expand our APIs over time. So next tip, engagement. This is all about speed. It's about engaging developers and making sure that you're able to impress developers in seconds, because you don't have more than seconds. They're going to come to the site, they'll very quickly decide if they want to use your service, and that's it. So you need to help them start in seconds. Since the early days, Stripe has always had code front and center. So if you look at what our website looked at in 2001, down here we actually have a curl command that you can run right away you can just copy and paste this into your terminal and it will run, and you will get a test charge created, and you'll get a response in JSON, and it will all work. We still do this today. This is our brand new homepage. We launched this a couple of months ago, and within the homepage we now have not curl, but nice modern JavaScript const is in there. You can see this is like actually real modern JavaScript. And if you look at sort of our documentation, and we'll talk a little bit more about documentation in a few minutes, you want to be able to allow developers to start interacting with your API in as fast time as possible. So what we have here is some code that users again can kind of copy and paste, get up and running, and you can experiment with this form to create a token immediately as soon as you go to the docs. You can see this right now if you have your computer, stripe.com/docs. Third tip, programming languages. GLDR support as many as you can. Developers are coming from diverse backgrounds. They're going to have a diverse set of tools which you need to support. Of course, libraries and SDKs do not replace great API design. They're only going to be the first part that the users interact with. Developers should always be able to get started with the API very easily, and that's where SDKs come in. They want to be able to use third-party libraries, and you might want to even think about things like Rust or Haskell or these sort of long tail of languages for your users as you start to roll out. At Stripe, we actually conduct API review sessions internally at the office every week, where we review and discuss proposals for new API changes, which could be a whole set of new APIs for a new feature, or it could just be a new field that's being added to a JSON payload that we return to our users, and discuss what's the decision making there, is it good? And at this meeting, we have a diverse set of engineers participate. They come from very different engineering backgrounds, and they're used to using different tools, different APIs, different languages, and we get a lot of input from a lot of different engineers when we're making these decisions. Once you have your sort of SDKs in place, these snippets are going to be very important for your users. Once they copy and paste these, they're going to be running snippets on top of on top of the SDKs that they've integrated. And from Ruby to Node to Go, Stripe has it covered. We look at SDKs as being really critical for a great developer experience. And beyond the classic REST abstraction, they also help with things like object expansion, things like network retries, and it really improves the developer experience by having these high-quality SDKs. If you look at this snippet here, this is what it would look like in our source code, and we have code tutorial in here, sort of like an SDL kind of thing. And then in code, we have Ruby, Python, PHP, Java, Node as different languages the user can switch between to see what these snippets would look like in different languages. We also try and share best practices to help developers be successful. In this particular blog post, we explained how we introduced idempotency and also exponential backoffs on retries. So it talks about how you can set a unique ID for every request. So if the network dies, you can retry the request with the same unique ID and be sure that the payment won't happen twice by mistake, for example. So we focus a lot on producing this type of content on our blog, on sort of best practices on using Stripe's API. And by doing so, this sort of really helps our users understand how to use those SDKs in a way that's really efficient. Along the same thread, I think this is a good segue into tip number 4, which is about documentation. Documentation, I think this personalized is a really important keyword. I'd like to sort of talk a little bit about this. This is a great quote from the co-founder of Parse, James Yu. The way to a developer's heart is great documentation. It's not easy, if it's not easy to access or delightful to use the documentation, developers will move on. They'll find a different API that's got better documentation, and in order to stop that happening, I'd sort of like to walk you through some ideas that we've implemented at Stripe regarding our docs. So into personalization, what you can see here, this is actually our redesigned documentation. We redesigned this last year. Under the hood, we've got the whole thing working as a single page app. So it's very fast. You can zip through these pages without any reloads. And we actually, I think Algolia is here as well, but we actually integrated Algolia's search API. So you can search through the docs within the browser, which is really nice too. And for each code snippet, this is when you're logged in, or this is when you're not logged in, this is what you'll see. But when you're not logged in, we have a test key here, which says you can sign in and you can use your own key. So you can copy and paste this code and it will run, but it's just a test key, so you won't really be able to do anything with it beyond that. And then when you're logged in, what you'll see here, you can sort of switch your languages. In whatever language you have, the test key is going to stay there as a dynamic thing. And when you hover over this, you'll see your own account attached to it. So when you copy and paste one of these snippets, it will work right away, and you can log into your dashboard, and you can see the results, and you can check your logs, and everything will work. We also store the language setting in your browser's sort of local storage. So whenever you visit a different page, or if you go away and come back, you're going to still have your language settings there, so everything is nice and consistent. Another thing on interactivity. We think that you should obsess about every detail of your docs and optimize for how people will action, how people will interact with those docs. So if they're like following those docs step by step, copying and pasting, an interactive demo is a really great way to sort of let them see what will happen when they go through these steps. So this is an example from our launch of Apple Pay on the web. In case you're not familiar, Apple Pay has a Apple Pay on the web feature where within Safari you can have an Apple Pay button and you can buy from your Safari browser. So we think this is a great way to get developers engaged quickly. What happens is you pick that in the docs and Apple Pay actually starts up, and if you have your phone, it will come up and ask you for the authentication, and it's very real, it's very interactive. And the process behind these demos is also interesting because we actually, for this case, we started with the documentation. We started with the code that we thought developers would want to write, that they would want to see, code that developers would find easy. And then we implemented that in Stripe.js, which is our client-side library, and made it a reality. So we try to follow this approach for every new product launch. We optimize for the code developers will have to write, and the documentation, and making sort of high-quality code, high-quality documentation, and then we try and take the burden as much as possible as far as making that a reality. Another example of interactive documentation is how we put live data into our docs. So this is what our API reference looks like. And if you're signed in, it will actually populate code samples with your personal API key. So this is Daniel at Stripe.com, and you can see like Sumitomo Ginko is like the bank name, and this is this is just stripe.com/doc/API, but the information which is here in the sample is your own information, which you obviously know better than fake information that Stripe would have made up. So you can quickly look in here, identify what each field is, what it does, and it is quite convenient. Also talking about documenting the API in a way that's reliable. One thing that we found good, and sort of show you a little bit sort of behind the scenes about how we build our API reference. This is what it looks like in our actual APIs. It's charge API resource, and we have the fields in there. And we actually have a document sort of method here in our SDL, which allows us to write documents in code. So when it comes to describing what a different request response parameters are, they are dependent on the API version. So we pull these directly in from code, so everything is intertwined. So this code will generate the documents over here, which are guaranteed to be correct because it's code. We actually have we have many services at Stripe, but we don't separate the code bases as much as possible. We keep a single code base. So if we're deploying our API or if we're deploying our site docs, they're separate services, but since it is all coming from the same code base, there's no risk of us losing sync there. Tip number 5, error codes. It's critical to have error codes which are genuinely useful, which means you have to anticipate what errors might occur when and what the user needs. So, as a couple of examples, if this is our Ruby SDK, but if you run Stripe customer create and you haven't set your API key, this is the error that comes back. And a couple of things to highlight here. First of all, there's code you can copy and paste in the error message. So if you copy and paste, like you needed to run this code, but you didn't run it. So here's the code, and you can just use this code. And if you don't know what your API keys are, here's where to go to get your API keys. And if you have any questions, here's our email address in the error code. So I think it would be quite frustrating for someone to come back with like a generic authentication error and think, well, it's got to do with authentication. How does Stripe do authentication? Go back to the start. This gives a very actionable result. Another thing which sometimes happens is people mix up test and production keys. So if you're using your test key by mistake, or sorry, if you're using this is if you're using your live, or your test key, but you meant to use your live key. So what we'll actually do is we'll look up this object in both test mode and live mode. So we send you back a 404 saying we couldn't find the charge, but if you change your API key to the other API key that you have, you will find the charge. So is that what you want to do? You know, we found the charge, but it was somewhere else, and this could save precious minutes for a developer. It will be very frustrating to debug this without this sort of help. Another thing I think is kind of unique to Stripe. It should be a bit more popular. I think we find our users love it. Is complete HTTP request logs. Every request that comes in, we log it, and every response that isn't a GET response, we also log it. So you can see everything in the dashboard. Whenever something unexpected occurs, you can come to the dashboard, see exactly what happened, and debug into it. If you notice errors in production from edge cases you haven't anticipated in development, which you will, this is the place to go. Okay, tip 6, support. You get into your API from the beginning. What's fascinating about the product with Stripe is that it's automated and it's very self-serve. You don't talk to our sales team before you use Stripe generally. You just come along, sign up, and get started. So when developers have successfully integrated the API, we need to give them confidence that they have the support they need to go live. And when they have issues, they know that they can come to Stripe and that we're going to be able to be there to help them. So developer support is core to Stripe's product. One thing which we spend a lot of time on is providing technical guidance. So we have a developer support team. This is what they do. It's their dedicated job to provide developer support. And they're available in places like IRC, Stack Overflow. And in Japan, we've actually started writing content on Kita. So if you want to learn about our subscriptions or a specific product, we may have an article about it on Kita. And you can engage with our team directly here. Transparency is also critical when interacting with developers. I think in sales interactions, a lot of the time you can kind of bluff your way through, but with developers, you absolutely can't. So transparency is paramount. Being open and clear inspires confidence, especially with developers. So one thing that we do is we produce this status page. I actually took this screenshot last night. It shows that we have 99.997% uptime over the last 90 days on our main API, and we push out all these numbers. We find that competitors in Japan, for example, have a lot of downtime at night time. Stripe is up 24/7. We can't afford to go down at the night time in Japan because that's not the night time in Europe or America. So we make sure that these numbers are very clear, very transparent. When something happens, we update here, and then we also put an update on Twitter for our developers to see. Tip number 7, updates to the API. These can be very painful if you don't get them right. We do ship frequent updates to the API, which is generally a good thing, but breaking something that a developer has built on your API is definitely not a good thing. It's been Stripe's approach to provide near full backwards compatibility wherever possible. So speaking a bit about backwards compatibility on our API upgrades, our upgrades are versioned and they're non-breaking. So your integration will still work even when we upgrade our API. So as far as like how we do this technically, when you first use Stripe's API, we'll actually record the version of that day, and we'll lock you into that version, which you can manually upgrade. And if your version is out of date, when you're looking at the docs, there'll be this blue banner that says you're using an older version of the API, and we help you sort of upgrade your API. As far as how we actually do this, which you may be interested in, we actually have dates set up for each API version. So this is the version from July 2016, a list of new features. We have dated here, a description of what they are, and then we tie this to the docs where we actually have the change log where you can see what changed in each version and if that's important to what you're using. If you're not using subscriptions and subscriptions change, you don't need to worry about it. You can just go and upgrade and not worry about your code breaking. Last tip, think bigger. What else can you do to help developers, specifically your developers, succeed? Communicating frequently with developers, keeping tabs on tools that they're using, and continuing to sort of build your product against those tools to make sure that you have the most recent experience is important. Open API, GraphQL, maybe things which are useful to bring your API to the next level. And I think thinking broadly about the tooling that your developers, that might help your developers be more effective every day is critical. If you see any gaps, work on filling those gaps and trying to build that level of sort of trust and mutual understanding between your developers and your company. A couple of things here. RunKit is a really cool tool that we're pretty excited about. It has all of NPM in there. It has like every NPM package. It allows you to put together these really cool notebooks. So this is just 3 lines of code which will pull the location of the International Space Station and show it. And what comes back here is latitude and longitude coordinates. And then RunKit knows to make a nice map and show it on there. And you can use things like RunKit to make your documentation come to life. So Express uses RunKit to have interactive documentation where you can actually run this code and the API which you're defining here will actually come up and you can actually hit it and you can actually test out RunKit, test out Express from their docs. So we're really excited about sort of what the RunKit team is building. So it looks like I'm running a little bit out of time. Thanks so much. I hope these 8 tips have been useful. 20 years after the creation of the internet, the emergence of APIs is providing access to key pieces of infrastructure. We think that APIs are the building blocks of the future of the internet economy. And we hope that you can share any feedback that you have about your experience with Stripe as a developer, or if you're in developer relations, if there's any tips that you have for us. Can't wait to see what you build. Thanks so much.